Okay, so today we're going to dive into a pretty wild idea. What if one of our oldest, most ancient myths wasn't just a story, but was actually a kind of technical manual for us?
Yeah, think about that for a second. What if a creation story wasn't just a story, but a record? A literal set of instructions for how to build a human being, just hidden in plain sight for millennia? That's the question we're really going to dig into today.
And it all starts with this one line from Babylonian tablets that are thousands of years old. It sounds like poetry, right? A god named Marduk mixed divine blood with clay to fashion the first humans. Beautiful. But the theory we're about to unpack asks a pretty wild question. What if they meant every single word of that? Literally.
So to really get this, we've got to go right to the source. And that source is the ancient Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish.
Now, the Enuma Elish, this is a big deal. It's one of the oldest, most complete origin stories humanity's ever discovered. It's basically the Babylonians' grand epic explaining how everything, the whole cosmos, the gods, and yeah, us, came to be.
And this is where things get, well, kind of strange. Because the text is super specific, almost like it's a recipe. You've got your two main ingredients, divine blood from the gods and clay from the earth. But it's the purpose that really gives you pause. The whole point was to create a worker. Remember that word, worker. It's going to be important.
Okay, so let's press pause on that ancient recipe for a second. We're going to jump over to a totally different world, anthropology. Why? Because it turns out there is this massive, unexplained mystery in our own evolutionary history that just maybe connects right back to all this.
So, picture this. For an incredibly long time, we're talking over 150,000 years, people who looked just like us, anatomically modern humans, were kind of stuck. Their bodies were modern, but their behavior wasn't. They used the same simple tools over and over for thousands of generations. And then, bam, it's like someone flipped a switch.
Right around 40,000 years ago, everything changes. And I mean everything. This wasn't some slow, gradual process. It was a full-on creative explosion. Anthropologists even call it the Great Leap Forward, because it completely rewired what it even meant to be human.
All of a sudden, you see art appearing for the first time. Complex tools, burial rituals, all the evidence of symbolic thought, the stuff that makes us us. It's like modern consciousness just appeared. Now sure, there are theories. Scientists will point to things like climate change pushing us to innovate, or maybe language finally hit some kind of critical point. But none of those theories really explain how fast and how explosive this change was. It feels less like evolution and more like a software update. So the big question, the one that stumped scientists for decades, is what was the trigger? What really happened 40,000 years ago?
Okay, so you see what we've got here, right? Two big mysteries running side by side. On one hand, an ancient recipe for making humans. On the other, a totally unexplained explosion of human intelligence. And this is where the theory goes from interesting to absolutely wild, because it claims these two mysteries, they're actually the same story.
The core idea is this. The Enuma Elish isn't a myth. It's a record. It's a memory. Yeah, maybe a distorted, poetic one, but a memory of a real event. A deliberate genetic upgrade that kicked off humanity's great leap forward.
And when you start looking at the myth through that lens, the language just shifts. It stops sounding poetic and starts sounding kind of technical. Divine blood? Well, that becomes advanced DNA. The clay of the earth? That sounds a lot like the genetic code of a pre-existing hominid, right? And fashioning a being? That's genetic engineering. And all of a sudden, that whole worker purpose we talked about, well, it starts to make a very different, and honestly, a pretty frightening kind of sense.
Yeah, when you break it down like this, it really does stop sounding like myth and starts sounding more like a lab report. The theory suggests a really clear four-step process. Step 1. Identify a native primate species. 2. Isolate and pull out its DNA. 3. Infuse it with your own, more advanced DNA. And 4. Create a new hybrid species. A species made in the god's own image.
I mean, it's a wild idea. It's compelling for sure, but it's also deeply unsettling. And you have to admit, if there's even a tiny piece of truth to it, it forces us to ask some really profound questions about who and what we really are. Okay, so let's just recap everything real quick. We've got this ancient text that talks about gods creating a worker race by mixing divine and earthly stuff. Then we have this huge scientific mystery about a sudden, unexplained leap in human intelligence and creativity. This theory we've been walking through just connects the dots. It argues one is the explanation for the other, that our great leap was actually a deliberate genetic upgrade, and the goal? To create a docile worker species.
So, look, is any of this true? Honestly, that's not really the point of this explainer. The point is what a powerful thought experiment it is. It really shows you how taking an ancient story and just looking at it through a completely new, modern lens, well, it can totally change the kinds of questions we ask about our own origins.
And all of this leads to one last pretty haunting question, doesn't it? If we were designed, if we were in fact engineered to be workers, what parts of that original design, what parts of that programming might still be running in the background of our lives today?